Last week, I showed you a demo about the data migration prototype that I created to separate the migration into multiple files. And I got a great feedback. And today, I'll just show you a migration UI, data migration UI, which allow us to manage the migration from the user interface. And one more thing.
Can you scan barcodes or QR codes with this UI? No.
No. If we look to this migration, this one. Let me first open the OrchardCore one. This one. I think we know this one, the users from the user module, and we talked that on every version we create a new update method. And there's a feedback that somebody may prefer to run one big migration on each version of Orchard, for example. For that, I introduced a way here that you can skip a migration. For example, if I have 5 migrations or 4 migration, maybe whenever I want to release a migration, release a version, I can skip the previous 3 and just put all the code in the last migration. This is just optional. But what I want to show you here, which is very important, is the data migration UI. Let me go to the features and the data migration UI. When you enable this feature, there will be a menu item here that will scan and discover all the migration from the enabled features. For example, if I go to the maps, which has single migration, I think, and come back again, it will show up here. So it will show there is a one migration for the Google Maps, which is already migrated, and you can roll back from here, and the migrate button offshore, it is disabled. So I created a bunch of migration for Gravatar as example. There is one already applied and one should be skipped, and there are 2 not applied yet. Now, when I click migrate from here, the migration will be applied, and if I check the migration here, if you remember last time I created a new record, but this time I try to integrate with the data migration, Orchard data migration. So if I zoom this one, you will notice there is a new migration. Migration 3 is applied from the Gravatar module. Same thing when I apply the 4th one, it will be applied, and when I refresh this record again, there will be the migration 4 has been applied. Same as the migrate, you can roll back whenever you want. For example, I want to roll back to this one or this one, for example, to this one. It will roll back to all the selected migration. That is about the data migration UI. Just a simple way to clean up what the migration did in the database. And that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, this is one demo. I have another demo if there is a time, or otherwise yes, I will.
Is it related to migration? Because I will have questions, comments.
Yes.
Yes, it is related.
No. The next demo, no, sorry. I misunderstood. No, it
okay,
is
so I can
not
ask
edited.
my questions now,
Okay,
because
okay,
to keep on the topic. So
okay.
I like the UI, and I think it's interesting to have it per feature, because that makes sense to go back per feature. However, it can't work. It just works for the demo, but it doesn't work for real feature, because you can't roll back migrations like this or go up migrations like this. It's not on demand, because the code of the feature, when it's enabled, is meant for specific migration to be executed. Like if I have the code right now of a feature, it has to be run for migration 4. It might work by chance, but most of our features, they won't work unless migration 4 has been executed successfully, because the code itself will read stuff in a column or in a field that has been created by migration 4 in most cases, or that's what it expects. So if you were to roll back to migration 2, then maybe the rollback will work, but the code is still expecting migration 4. And then the website will fail because the table is not here, the column is not here, the data is not here, or whatever. So rollback would mean, so I don't know how it can work in a real world.
I think it works for him because he changed the migration to up and down.
Yes, exactly.
Now, with our migrations, it won't work.
Yes.
No, I'm not saying that. But I agree. I understand what you say, and I still will say the same statement. It can't work. It works if your demo has no code that depends on the latest migration. That's the case with your demo, because that's the demo. That's a demo to show a feature that can't work with actual modules. Like today, I release take any module from Orchard with more than 2 migrations, and you will see that the latest migration creates some data that is used by the latest code. And when I say latest code, the only version of the code, which is the live code. Here, look at that. You see?
Yes.
So this one is just creating an index. But if you take one that is creating a colon, for instance, you can't revert previously to this migration, because it means there is no more colon. So what is the code doing now that it's expecting a colon? It will fail. The SQL statement will fail because the colon doesn't exist anymore. But the SQL statement in the C# code is still there expecting the colon. So the feature will fail, and maybe the site will completely be broken because the feature is enabled, but the database doesn't match the feature. Mike, up, down still makes sense, right? It's still the same issue, because you go down, down, down. Yes, you drop the colon, but the code itself is expecting a colon, because the code is expecting the migration 4 to be executed.
Maybe if you go to a page that requires this field, yes, it will fail. But I find this may be suitable for certain scenarios like cleanup. For example, I
agree. If you want to disable a feature, then do the reverting the migrations, and not just from 1, 2, 3 migration, but everything, because I don't see, when you delete the feature, I don't see the point of reverting to the middle step of the migrations. You just want, okay, let's delete everything. So undo all the migrations. That's fine, but that's not when the feature is running.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, so then I will agree to see, and maybe you had it already last time, for each feature to disable and also to disable and clean.
Yeah,
and that will make sense. So this UI is nice because it's interesting that you can go back and forth because you have up, down, and that's nice. But that's completely, you would not have it in an Orchard website because that doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's just for demo. Okay.
You know, another thought, the issue you mentioned, Sebastian, is great point. I think it's usually when you're dropping or altering table. But if you're trying to migrate to update definition of a content item, you could still have a steps where you can say, hey, migrate step 3 or 4 manually, like, hey, skip this.
Yeah.
So if that might be a solution where we can say, well, if you want to create a table, maybe we'll have, or maybe we need to find a better way to migrate tables. Maybe we'll have a table that allow us to migrate, like alter or create table, another migration type for migrating content type. So like a soft migration. Soft migration probably wouldn't want to break or shouldn't break anything if you're only updating content items. So maybe one way to kind of to get a medium ground is to have like a hard migration and a soft migration, where soft migration really are only for updating data or data definition. So it's never going to impact the actual, like it's not going to cause a breaking change. But a hard migration, like creating an index or alter an index, that one would cause a migration. So that one, maybe you can't really use the UI for it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So if we have a way to split the two, that could make sense. But we would need to probably add some sort of dependencies where the hard migrations are done before the soft migrations or something like that.
And so hard migrations, like you call it, is what I call migrations today. This is what we have. These are hard migrations. Okay, they can
Correct.
do table and things. And the soft migrations, we use the migrations to do that too, because they provide a way to do stuff before the feature is enabled, and like upgrading content, changing data, whatever makes sense. We don't have to, but we don't have like step by step for sure, like we do for migrations. But in Orchard 1, we did that a few times. We called them updates to update the data. Like at one point, we changed the way we stored content items. And to go to this version, you had to go to the UI to enable the features and everything. But then you had to click on update. And there was a step called update all content items for Orchard 1.6, for instance. And it would take all the data from the database using Ajax calls to do paging, and it will go over every content item. And it could fail in the middle, and you could continue later because there was a cursor to do that. So that was totally fine. That's how we did that. We had custom upgrades steps or features in the tool, such that if you were on Orchard 1.5 and you were to go to Orchard 1.6, you would have to go to the, let's upgrade to Orchard 1.6, and it will take all your data from 1.5, move it to data from 1.6. So we didn't use migration for these things that didn't fit in migration. We used something else. So far, all our things, we were able to integrate it in migration or provide SQL scripts to run out of the thing, but we could have stuff that runs automatically and that is less from a migration. I agree. But why would, but we don't split it because we don't have the requirement of going back today.
Yes.
Or just, that's why we didn't do that. I still think the only thing I see interesting here is to be able to clean fully the feature.
Yeah. Yes.
I diverge from your comment, Mark, but yeah, I see what you mean. It's just today we haven't had the necessity to split the two of them or to run something out of the migration. If we were to run something out of the migration to update content in a soft way, I don't think we should have another feature. We can just, maybe it's not about feature, but more about a consistent way to do that. So like a guidance and like like we did in Orchard 1. We had something in configuration to say, hey, we know that we are on 1.6, but you could run that before to upgrade your data from 1.5 because it will be required to clean stuff, to remove all the parts, to whatever, to change the schema of JSON documents, because otherwise you won't see the data because it's somewhere else now, things like that. Cool. So you made progress on the feedback. Up, down. So you have skip. I will go further than skip, but more like jump. Like
Yes.
if you're on migration 1, instead of skip, you could say jump to migration 4 because you don't need me. You don't need 1, 2, 3. You can go directly to 4.
Yeah. Yes.
That might be a better way. Instead of skip through, say jump. Because maybe from 1, and this way you will have the same thing as we have today. The return 4. Here is jump, skip to migration 4. That's even better. Or next, or maybe you could have the same chain in the attributes like the next previous. And this way, so what's interesting is that if you have a next, then after migration 1, the next you can say is migration 2, next is migration 3, and you can give it the name you want. It doesn't have to be numbered. It can be a nice name. And with the previous, like the next, you could say that if you're on migration 4 and you do a down, then the previous could be nothing because maybe the down of migration 4 just deletes everything because it knows it can delete everything. It doesn't have to run the down from 3 because it knows everything that is there when you are at 4. So it can say, oh, just delete the table. You don't need to run the 3 because it would just do the same thing. So that might be interesting to have a previous being nothing. So if you do down from migration 4, then it says, oh, when I'm done with migration 4 down, you don't need to do anything more. It deleted the table. You don't need to run migration 3 down. It's not down in this case. It's clean, uninstall, whatever.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
But I saw there are many systems, maybe they like to keep the versioning for the migration instead of like what we did in Orchard. We put the latest in the create and then we call the last update. But it depends.
Right, and it can be the same name also. Yeah, as it's just it could be the same name. No, I think it's fine to have different classes with the same name one by one. Instead of having 11 methods, you have 11 classes. And the first one can just say skip everything, or the first one can just say skip all or skip to nothing because it will just be creating from nothing. Yeah.
Okay.
The first class could be called create. And then the second one could be called update from whatever. No. You need to be able to run one thing and be done. You should not have to rely on 11 different methods or 11 different classes. If you can do it in one shot, then do it in one shot because it's faster and it's less trouble than all these steps. I don't know how EF does that. When you run migrations, you have to go through all the migrations, all the updates every time, even when you restart. Or they don't restart. It's just assuming.
They keep track of the latest applied migrations.
But when you have 10 classes.
Yes.
And imagine your database is empty. Does it run the 10 classes?
Yes, because they will ask for the migration history or history migration table, and we'll check if there is an already applied migration. If not, it will run all the migration, the available migration.
That's bad. Why?
And
why do they need? Well, why don't they do just a method that says you have nothing? Let's create the table like it should be in one shot. Okay, but that's a choice. But I mean, I don't understand why you don't do
Yes,
it.
yes, because as I said, it is a matter of choice, because some bodies like the versioning of the history of the database. We did something in this date, we did something in this date, and so on. But at the end, the result is the same.
In our case, we keep it. We still have the 10 versions, the 10 steps that do that. It's just that when we see that it's the first time, then there is no from an existing state. We can go directly to the last state. That's just an optimization. I think it's nice. So I like the way we do that in Orchard, just for that. As long as we can skip everything, I think we should keep it.
Okay.
Okay, all good. Thank you.
Also, this is maybe
there is a new thing.
Useful for the development, I think, when you in
Maybe,
development
yes.
environment. And the rollback, a good choice, I think, when we uninstalled the feature, it will run the rollback automatically behind the scenes.
For me, that's the best point, is rolling back everything, like clean the feature. That's why to see the button disable and clean in the features page, I think it's much more important.
Okay.
Even in development, you can also say, okay, I just disable and roll back, and then you do your change, and you're like, okay, let's re-enable the feature now. That would be super useful.
Okay.